Perhaps most famous for being among people's favorite movies to watch while on hallucinogens, even if I personally would never recommend that, Alice in Wonderland was among the two movies Walt Disney made in his lifetime that he was said to be disappointed with, feeling that the movie lacked heart. But in spite of that, the movie has managed to gain a following over the years, even aside from its trippy potential, with many loving its zany animation, all over the place plot, and character designs that have gone on to influence almost every following interpretation of Lewis Carroll's books. And not to mention, because so many of the characters' personalities and actions were changed from the original books, it's led many to speculate and wonder what the true nature of many of them are, to the point that you can find many different but no less interesting theories on the why behind the actions of said characters. And today, I'd like to go over this particular aspect of the movie. Does the crazy nature of Wonderland and its residents give way to perhaps the most interesting and open-ended characters the Disney company has ever created? And obviously there will be spoilers ahead, so in case you've never seen the movie and don't want to know what happens, you should probably click off the video. You have been warned. Okay. So, speculating about the true nature of characters in fiction is nothing new. Ever since stories have been told, people have been arguing that a character's true personality is different than is presented by the narrative. And more often than not, it usually involves a character being presented as a good guy by the narrative, and these people trying to argue that they aren't as nice or sympathetic as the story claims they are. Heck, you can find stuff like this going all the way back to Jack and the Beanstalk, a story that's been told for thousands of years. But the point is, while most of the time these alternate interpretations of the characters mainly come from people either reading way too deeply into a given story, or them wanting a character to fit a mold they don't and are trying to argue why they actually do, Alice in Wonderland actually offers a much more legitimate case for all of this. Though if you love analyzing stories and speculating the true nature of characters, that's fine. If that's what you enjoy doing, then good for you. I'm happy for you. But either way, the point is that the characters in this movie are completely nuts, to the point that it's very hard to know what the true nature of any of them is. Now, there are more obvious instances of character speculation, such as if the White Rabbit is one of the nicer residents or a classist jerk, or if the Dodo is really as stupid as he appears or is just messing with people to get his kicks. Some might even wonder if it's the same with the Mad Hatter and the March Hare. But personally, I just think they're both lunatics that really do think their logic makes sense. But the point is, just from these few characters alone, a ton can be speculated about their true nature. And that's not even getting into the characters who are even more open-ended. Like, take the King of Hearts, for example. Unlike his wife, who's clearly just a homicidal maniac and loves it, the king is a lot harder to figure out. Because in the book, for instance, it's revealed that he secretly pardons everyone his wife orders executed and is the one that's truly running the kingdom. But in the movie, it seems that if anything, the exact opposite is true. The queen is clearly calling all the shots, to the point that the king gets no respect and is treated like a child by the queen. But that doesn't mean there isn't a ton more to wonder about him. Does he actually support his wife's executions like the movie implies, or is he just putting on an act and secretly saves them later like in the book? And also, why does he ask the Queen to give Alice a trial? Does he legitimately want to help her, or is he just doing it for fun, or something else? Especially because he's clearly shown to be afraid of his wife's temper, so why would he risk unleashing it? And that whole thing, of course, just raises even more questions. Why is he the only one that can have any influence with the Queen? What is it about him that made the Queen marry him, and thus be able to have more pull with her than anybody else? And why does he take his title as the king so seriously when nobody else seems to? Especially with the Queen appearing to run everything anyway. These are all legitimate questions with no answer to them. It's entirely up to the audience's interpretation of the events that play out. And honestly might just make the King of Hearts, of all people, one of the most open-ended, speculative, and maybe even interesting characters in the whole movie. But, of course, nothing can compare with the sheer ambiguity that surrounds the Cheshire Cat. Heck, this character has so many questions surrounding him that you would have to practically make a whole separate movie just to try and answer all of them. But what's particularly notable is that not only is he absolutely bonkers, but he knows it, which heavily contrasts with almost everyone else in Wonderland. Which only makes one further speculate. How many of his actions are deliberate, and how many are the product of insanity? If he's crazy and loves it, does that mean he does what he does because he enjoys it? And you notice when Alice brings him up that the Queen seems afraid of him? Does that imply he's just that powerful? Or has he done who knows what to warrant such a reaction? And that's not even getting into why he seems to love messing with Alice and constantly giving her the worst advice possible. Is he just using her to get his kicks? Or does he legitimately think what he says and does is helpful? Or alternatively, could he be trying to help Alice in a roundabout way? Could it be that he's all-knowing and deliberately orchestrating events so that she'll learn her lesson and wake up? I mean, it's unlikely, but it's impossible to know anything for sure when it comes to him. He could be Alice's secret best friend or worst enemy, and based solely off the narrative, we'll never know for sure. Really, the only two characters that are quite easy to figure out, and thus leave little room for speculation, is the Queen of Hearts and Alice herself. Now, the Queen, as I just said before, is a bad-tempered, homicidal lunatic and loves it, as long as you don't say that to her face. But Alice is a bit more interesting, as she's simply a child who gets her ultimate wish of living in a world of nonsense, only to quickly learn that's not actually what she wants. And as she herself actually notes, she can be pretty wise and gives herself pretty good advice, but being a child, she often does what she isn't supposed to anyway. And as she learns the hard way, that often causes all sorts of problems, which honestly leads to easily the saddest scene in an otherwise fun and zany movie. Walt Disney even had the appearance of the Jabberwocky removed to include this scene, and honestly it's a fair trade-off. Forgetting about her curiosity, Alice learns that she should listen to her own wisdom and be grateful for what she has in the world she lives in, as the world she found herself wanting to live in is anything but the dream place she thought it would be. But speaking of that, this movie even leaves the nature of Wonderland itself a bit to interpretation. Because while it's obvious the place runs on nonsense, there's still one other question surrounding it without a definitive answer. Is the whole land really just a dream like the narrative implies? Or a real place that Alice actually just happened to visit in her sleep? Now once again, In this case, the movie actually seems to want the audience to believe that it was all a dream, but it still leaves the whole thing just ambiguous enough to question otherwise. And not to mention, if it really was all just a dream, then does the movie even amount to anything beyond Alice learning her admittedly very important lesson? Now, obviously, I could keep going on for hours about all the questions and alternate interpretations of the characters this movie leaves the audience with, but I think I've already made my point quite clear. Now, as I said in my video on ambiguity, which you can find a link in the description to, and many other videos, being open-ended and ambiguous can be a good thing, or sometimes even necessary in order to make a story work. And this video is not me saying the speculative nature of the characters is a bad one at all. Just the opposite, in fact, as it frankly fits the nature of a place called Wonderland that's full of crazy people perfectly. All I am saying is that it leaves a ton open to interpretation as far as most of the characters go because of that, since it's impossible to figure out what's truly going on in their heads as a result. And as I argued before, because of that very open-ended and ambiguous nature regarding them, it might just make the characters in Alice in Wonderland some of the most interesting out there, if only because of all the questions about them that are never answered. Okay, I think I've made my point. So now I'd like all of you to tell me, do you believe that the open-ended nature of Alice in Wonderland can lead to a ton of questions and speculation, and thus interest, in the characters and movie as a whole, or do you believe it's all explained well enough and that I've got it all wrong? Please feel free to let me know in the comments below. And like always, you don't have to agree with anything stated in this video. If you think I'm wrong about everything I said, that's perfectly okay. And thank you all for watching. I really appreciate it. And I hope to see you all next time.